This episode is going to get a little emotional. Just kidding. We're going to dive into emotional intelligence and how we all can improve in that area, especially as leaders and entrepreneurs, and how we can do that. And so I'm bringing on Christina Alden today, and she's going to dive into just how we can do that, how we can improve our emotional intelligence, and the benefit it is to understand emotional intelligence and to have that as part of our life. She's a speaker, trainer, a mentor, and a brand strategy consultant. So, Christina, welcome to Elevate Your Brand today.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Hello.
Absolutely, yeah. Looking forward to diving into this topic. I think it's a good one. I think it's a growing topic. You hear more about emotional intelligence than I did 10 years ago, and so
Yeah, it's interesting because the way that emotional intelligence has been around for a while,
Mhm.
and a lot of the practices and the traits of emotional intelligence are discussed in leadership trainings and things a lot. However, to put a label on it and to be able to, attempt to quantify the skill level of 26 different traits, all of the elements and the facets that influence emotional intelligence, and really, like you said, it actually makes everything better. It's not just,
Yeah.
while I do emotional intelligence in the workplace, our personal relationships, our professional relationships, they all improve when we start being able to understand our emotions better, express them better, and, understand the emotions of other people as well.
Yeah, and I think once we can do that, I think it opens up a lot of doors just in our own like what what are the biggest benefits you see when people really start to learn more about their emotional intelligence or just emotional intelligence in general?
When I work with, like you said, I'm a speaker, I'm a
Mhm.
trainer and a brand strategy consultant, but also I'm a mentor. And so when I work with my mentoring clients, or even every now and then I'll do some coaching as well, I'll do executive coaching one-on-one. It's interesting because a lot of times people think, oh, emotional intelligence, and this is a leadership skill. It's going to help me in my career, and yada yada. I'm going to help sell things better, right? Because I'm going to be able
Mhm.
to touch those emotional triggers to make people be motivated into action. You think about that, but really, the thing that people don't talk about is you have reduced stress.
Mm. How is
Think
that?
about
Why
it.
is that? Yeah.
You have less conflict.
Okay. Yeah.
And not only that, but you might still have the same stressors, the same conflict, the same difficult people around you. But when you learn how to navigate them better, your
Mhm.
stress levels go down, right? Your nervous system goes down. You have fewer health problems, headaches. You start to sleep better. You start to digest better your food. You have more nutrients. You start to feel healthier, right? And
Yeah.
so those are the benefits that I've found, especially, is that whatever the spinning is in your head, the ruminating, the insecurities, right? From
Mhm.
imposter syndrome. You're like afraid of that any moment you're going to be found out as a fraud, and somebody's going to discover that you're a big fraud and you don't belong here. You're going to get fired. You're going to get in trouble. You're whatever that is. When you can calm that down permanently,
Mm.
right? Because now it's not just a matter of, oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a few drinks and I'm just going to blow off some steam, right? It's not that. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to go for a run and that's going to help me. Now that'll help with some symptoms for sure.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is the actual skill set that will give you the tools so that, when you have a micromanaging boss coming in on you all the time, you have the language that's going to help create that space so that
Mhm.
you're not feeling the stressors. The micromanaging
Yeah.
boss isn't going away.
Right. Yeah.
However, your ability to deal with it and manage that stress and communicate, and still live your truth. That's what happens a lot of times, right? People start to feel trapped in their job. They start to feel like they can't speak out. They feel like they can't make something better, and they're just stuck in a situation. But if you have the tools that will empower you with the language, with the
Mm.
behaviors, with the, um, you know, politics, I still have some people that are in my tribe that help me with like political conversations,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Those could be
Uh-huh.
tough.
Yeah.
But office politics could be tough, and they could be really stressful if you don't really know how to navigate them.
So, yeah, how can we start with, you said right there, with our language and then with
Mhm.
actions, like, so starting with the language, how
Mhm.
how do we start learning to be more emotionally intelligent with our language? Where do we
Yeah.
start with that?
Well, a big thing that happens, and has happened to me so many times where I had to put my foot in my mouth, right, is that the stimulus comes in. And
Mhm.
so something will come in and it will trigger a reaction to our nervous system. We go,
Yep.
oh, look, I see a bluebird. All right, that's going to cause me to have a panic attack or a stressful
Mm,
thing. Or here comes that micromanaging boss.
yeah.
Now I'm going to have a certain response with my nervous system. Maybe I get flushed. Maybe my heart starts to beat a little bit more. I
Yeah.
might start clenching my hands. I might start avoiding the
Mm,
path where the boss is. If I want to. So you could do all of these different things to try to manage the symptoms, but you're not actually facing it and confronting it. And so
mm.
if you had some language, and in this case, let's say there's a bluebird coming in and it makes you really mad for some reason, like
Right.
bluebirds really make you mad, right? But one thing that you can pause and you can just think about your reaction and feel it.
Mm,
So when we talk about physics, right?
mhm.
When you observe a thing, you actually change it just because you're looking at it,
Hmm.
just because the observation is there. By the act of observing something, you're changing it. And so if we take that and we look at our behaviors, by the act of observing our behavior in that moment, bluebird comes in, "Urgh, I'm so mad, those darn bluebirds," right? Pause.
Mm,
And in that moment, you can think, what am I feeling? Where is it? My heart? Am I nauseated?
hmm.
Does my foot hurt? Like, is my hearing? What's happening?
Yeah.
And just by this simple observation technique, you're changing the moment. That's already interrupting the patterns and the energy, which is going to cause your brain, your amygdala, your limbic system in there to pause as well. Because
Right.
what happens is our lizard brain, that limbic system, our primitive brain, it
Yeah.
gets the signal first. Bluebird comes in, our senses take in the stimuli, and then suddenly our amygdala goes, danger, danger, danger. If you can wait 700 milliseconds to pause and give your brain this time for that prefrontal cortex to get the signal so your executive functions come online,
Mm,
then you can go, oh, bluebird, I hate those things. But actually, if I stop and think about it, a bluebird has never really actually pecked my eyes out. And I only have that fear from back when we were kids and my big brother was, bullying me and teasing me. And I thought that bluebirds were going to come, whatever that is. But you can take those split seconds and just pause. Just by the act of pausing, you're changing the pattern and interrupting it.
mm.
Next, to part two, we have a moment to think about how we're going to respond, you
Yep.
know? And so that way, instead of doing like what I've done so many in my 20s, so many times in my 20s is run off your mouth,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Bluebird comes in, it starts attacking. Ah!
Yeah.
All of these, I start cussing at the bird. And first of all, the bird doesn't even know English, so they're
Yeah.
not going to listen to you anyway. But what if it's your manager,
Right.
right? Who's
Right.
micromanaging you? And
Mhm.
suddenly you go off.
Yeah.
So I teach the pause and pivot technique where you can pause and then pivot the conversation with language.
Mm,
And there are some what I call back pocket phrases that you
okay.
could just kind of memorize 3 or 4
Yeah.
back pocket phrases. So that way, when the stimulus comes in and the bluebird is heading your way
Yeah.
and you start to feel the heat in your cheeks, your heart
Mhm.
starts beating faster, you start to ramp up, you can pause and pull out one of those back pocket phrases that even though your emotions are high, you can depend on this phrase to get you out of it and to say the politically correct thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so we do a pause and pivot method, and then we do the having a back pocket phrase, and it's different for everybody. So
Okay.
I've
It's
helped
like a safe word
mentees.
almost.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Like because you don't know, everybody's different. I don't
Yeah.
do one size fits all. I don't
Right.
do buy my blueprint program and you'll make, 6 figures in 30
Right.
days. I don't do that because every unique individual is different. I
Mhm.
helped somebody once overcome, well, in their case, they were struggling with a work environment that was kind of hostile.
Mm. Yeah.
Unfortunately, they were getting bullied, and a lot of it was about their language
Hmm.
because people would bounce. They would pause and they'd be speaking and they'd be trying to think of the right word in English, and their coworkers would literally walk away. And so they had no respect. Here was a team lead and
Oh,
a developer team, and they had no respect because they stuttered, and then it caused more anxiety.
yeah.
So for them, we did a really quick thing. We're going to pause, we're going to pivot the conversation. And here's a couple back pocket phrases. And the one that worked the best for them was, hold on, English is my 7th language. Because the reality is that this person spoke 7 languages fluently.
Wow.
And every time a coworker would come to them with a problem, that person would have to pause, translate,
Mhm.
remember this is English, and
Yeah.
then speak English. And
Wow.
that helped tremendously because then what happens is it trips that empathy switch in people. People naturally have these things called mirror neurons
Mm.
in our neurology. And when we see somebody, you know, eh, fumbling in a vulnerable moment like that, where they're open, they're honest, there's a vulnerability, it trips the empathy switch, and then people go, "Oh yeah, sure, take your time."
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've
Yeah.
done that before, Chris, right?
Yeah.
Somebody slips or somebody needs a little help or the door, you're like, "Oh, you okay?" Right? We
Yep.
we naturally as humans want to help somebody and want to assist them. So that's a really good tool, and that's just one example of how I help somebody.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, and I've heard of like interrupting
Mm,
interrupting those thoughts process and pivoting like you're saying, and it's true. I mean, it's exactly what I've tried to do in my life even. And
mm,
but I like those back pocket words to having, or those phrases or whatever it is, to implement when you need a maybe even longer pause. Like, I think
yeah,
that's a really important thing to remember. Like, you can take that break, like, especially if you're dealing with other humans. Like you said,
yeah,
they have that empathy if you can just allow yourself to basically almost ask for it. Like, you're basically saying, hey, I need a second, I need a time, or hey, I'm dealing with this, like,
yeah,
give me a little grace, kind of thing.
yep. That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
So with that, like, in a personal life, like, that's a good example as far as like in the corporate setting. What if it's
Hmm.
like, I'm sure you can still do the same kind of interrupt if it's like self-talk, right? If you're like
Sure.
getting like you're yelling at yourself almost, and you can still break that pattern?
Yeah. Yeah, and some people would say that, you can compartmentalize,
Mm,
or you can even, dissociate. I don't
mhm.
necessarily, recommend that, but
Yeah.
you could even visualize. I've done this, before, with a couple different therapists where they have a technique that you're almost
Mm,
visualizing, um, a younger version of yourself.
okay, yep,
"Hey, I'm so worried. Oh my gosh," you got that little voice in there. "I think
yep.
we're gonna get fired. I can't believe the boss called us down. We're gonna da, da, da." And you can visualize tiny little version of Christina
Mm,
sitting right here going, "Oh my gosh, I'm so scared. I don't know what to do." And you can just kind of go, "Oh, I know. It's okay. Don't worry. Pat, pat,
right.
pat. I got this."
Yep.
That's a technique that I used, is that you envision yourself younger, stressing out. Now, when my therapist had told me this, the first one, I was like, ugh, enough of that. She was like, imagine your inner child. I'm like, inner child is a bunch of woo-woo crap. So then what she did is she said, imagine your niece. And I was like, oh yeah, my
Mm,
niece. At the time
yeah.
I didn't have children. I was like, oh yeah, my niece. I want my niece to succeed. And if
Right.
my niece were to come to me and say, oh my gosh, Auntie, I'm not good enough. I'm so stupid. My boss is going to come down. They're going to fire me in this. I would say, there. It's okay, darling. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you almost have to treat yourself that way. That's
Yep.
one technique that we use, almost like, and if you're like me, you don't like doing inner child stuff, but you
Right.
can envision your own kid or your niece or
Mhm.
your nephew or something. And what would you say to that child? Would you talk to them in the same way that you talk to yourself? No.
Right.
Shut up, sit down, just handle it, whatever the
Yeah.
thing is.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, like visualizing that because you would approach that different, hopefully at least would approach that
Hopefully. Oh
without,
yeah.
yeah, hopefully. So,
Right.
so with like, so maybe people even aren't even aware that they're having this process come in and they're unaware of like that's what's causing their stress. Maybe they
Mhm,
just how
mhm,
how can they connect the dot of like, oh, I get so anxious or nervous or stressed in this situation.
mhm.
How can they bridge the gap to, "Oh, and that's what's causing it, and that's what I need to pivot from?"
A lot of times what happens is anybody who's going to work with me, we're talking about emotional intelligence, whatever it
Mhm.
is, right?
Right.
And so, as a brand strategy consultant, I do product launch campaigns. We talk about emotional intelligence. How are we connecting our products and services through emotional intelligence? When I work with my mentees and they're talking about career development, how I'm going to get that internship and, navigating coursework with job searches and stuff, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence.
Yep.
If I'm talking to one of my startup founders, which, I had a startup founder in San Francisco who had a imposter syndrome, major imposter
Mhm.
syndrome. They had been declined for funding multiple times, specifically based on this person on the team. And
Hmm.
so, we worked together. We had like 3 sessions. And after just 3 sessions, he was feeling a lot more confident. And they went out to raise $750,000, which was really
That's
cool.
awesome.
Whatever you do, emotional intelligence is in it.
Yeah.
And so, if you're having conflict, any kind of conflict that's coming up repeatedly in your life, and you keep saying, oh, this person or that person or all these people. When I was 29 years old, I had to come to Jesus moment myself where I was putting my body in different parts of the planet. I lived in California. I lived in Vermont. I lived in Colorado. I went to Canada for a bit. I lived in an orphanage in Peru for a few months, right? And I was bouncing. I did 2 months here, 3 months there, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with all these people? I'm surrounded by idiots. Guess what? I had to look at the common denominator, right?
Mhm.
And I wanted different results. And so before I even knew what emotional intelligence was, I started working on these things, right? Communication, that's one of the facets of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Integrity, that's one of the facets of emotional intelligence. Integrity is what we do when nobody's watching.
Yep.
Right? Are you going to try to get away with it because nobody's watching? Are you going to try to, nobody will care because nobody's really going to notice? That right there is, causing that conflict and that
Mhm.
dissonance within. So if the outside and the inside, the greater those gaps are,
Yep.
the more imposter syndrome you're going to feel, the more like a fraud you're going to feel, the more you're going to feel like you're lying because you're maybe hiding something from your family, or and those things start causing, friction in
Mm.
all areas of your life. So if you have friction and you're noticing these patterns and you don't know why or how or whatever, and you don't really want to go to therapy, but you want actionable strategies, emotional intelligence is a really good way. There's a great book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and it actually breaks down all the 26 traits individually.
Okay.
You can take a test at the end of the book, and it'll tell you, go back to page 200 and work on your behavioral self-control for 3 months, and then come back and take the test again and see if it's improved. And you can
Yeah.
do those different things little by little by little. and it really changes your life. I mean, I'm proof. My clients are proof.
Yeah.
I grew up in extreme poverty. I grew up, with no resources, and to be able to be international speaker and trainer for Fortune 100 companies, or
Yeah.
I've spoken on all 7 continents. Like, it's only because of these techniques that I've used, that I've been able to bring such abundance into my life.
That's awesome too. And I think, yeah, these just been great, like what you shared and how people can start implementing change like immediately with how you've guided and given in this conversation, which is great. And I'm curious, like if you were to go back
Hmm.
15 years, 20 years and talk to yourself again, maybe
Hmm.
your 15-year-old self.
Oh, this is so great. It's so great that you said 15-year-old self, because that's a lot longer than 20 years ago, honey. Okay, so, but it's really great because I recommend, and one of the traits of emotional intelligence is mentorship. I recommend everybody become a mentor, everyone. And this is why, because this question, right? I'm constantly feeling like I'm talking to my younger self, because I have Asian Pacific Islander students that I mentor. And so I mentor Asian Pacific Islander students for free, in honor of my late husband, who was Chamorro. He was a Pacific Islander, and he really struggled through a lot of the transitions and through a lot of cultural kind of things and cultural shifts. So every time that I'm talking to my mentees, it's like talking to myself, my version of my younger self. And it's really great because I tell them things like, keep going.
Yeah.
I tell them things that come up often, like, this isn't going to matter in 10 years, right? Sure, somebody saw you picking your nose in the front row, like whatever, it was super embarrassing, you're
Right.
mortified. All right, well, stop picking your nose, and then in the future, just know that this isn't going to matter in 10 years. You don't have to worry about it. And I think that's what I would do, what I would just say, because it's so big, right? Like when you're a teenager, the emotions are so big and unmanageable, and
Yeah.
you have these huge emotions, but also limited life
Right.
experience.
Yep.
So now, as we get older, we have more life experience. And so it is our duty as adults to take that experience, learn from it, and grow. Because if you are a 45-year-old woman still acting like a 15-year-old with those
Right.
big feelings that are,
Yeah.
not managed, and you're always walking around dysregulated and expecting other people adapt to you, it's not going to work out so well.
Yeah. And I think that's a really cool way to kind of wrap things up. I think, learning all this for yourself, improving emotional intelligence, improving your position, you've overcome obstacles, and then be able to reach back
Yeah.
and pull someone else, kind of like your younger self, and be that
Uh-huh.
mentor. That's fantastic, and a great piece of advice. So,
Yeah. Thanks.
yeah, I just a lot of good value in this one. So, where can people connect with you
Mhm.
so they can continue to learn from you
Yeah.
and find out more?
I am Lucky Girly Girl everywhere on the interwebs. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me there. I am wrapping up my planning for a couple of new programs that I'm coming out with in 2023, which is cool. I've got a few trips planned. Like I said, I'm an international speaker. So this year, so far, I know I'm going to be in New Zealand. I'm going to be in Australia. I'll be in DevSum, Sweden. I love DevSum in Stockholm. Kansas City Developer Conference, of course. We'll see. I might go to Morocco and maybe even to Lithuania this year. So
That's awesome. That's cool. So yeah, everyone make sure you're checking out what she's got going on. Christina's doing a lot of good work and shares a lot to help people. So get connected with her. Continue to learn about emotional intelligence and improve ourselves. And again, Christina, thank you so much for being on Elevate Your Brand today.
Thanks a lot, Chris.